Alright, what's up, guys? Ready to go over chapter 3 and 4 again. Last class we did setting. Today I want us to focus on characters. And now we're going to start looking on some new characters emerging and how they affect the story. A quick run over of the summary of the chapters. Alright, let me just read it out here because we did 3 and 4. Rami and Sunson are visited by their neighbors. Chapter 3 is called Neighbors. Donna Rae Hilcher and Betty Hilcher. They take food as a sign of welcome, and father talks to Mrs. Hilcher and shows her around. Donna Rae and Rami are left alone and have their own conversation. Rami and Sunson walk the ladies home where they share a nightcap and then return home. Rami could not sleep, so he thought of Donna Rae and was able to sleep after that. We will go into some of that too and what that means for his friendship. Alright. Sunson's farm was very prosperous and people began visiting it in order to purchase goods. Sunson was stern with his bargaining at first, but then went back to his old ways of giving away his goods. Rami confronted him about that. Donna Rae and Rami become really good friends and spend a lot of time together. They have a great dinner at the Hilcher's house where Betty volunteers to sell at the market for Sunson. Sunson was not pleased but agreed to this and then they went home. So what we'll find happening is that Sunson still wants to be a little bit more independent, but he eventually gives in and he realizes that he needs his help. And I think this is very good for the growth of Sunson. Now, one of the main things that's happening in chapter 3 and 4, as we said in the last class, is Sunson's growth. Is the fact that Sunson is growing to be a better person, a better businessman, and more responsible. He's putting his priorities in place, and that becomes something very important in the movement of the plot because everything started with Sunson's irresponsibility. So now that he's more responsible, what are the different changes that's going to happen? We also learned in previous chapters that Jake seems to be moving in on Debbie, which is Ma, and that can have an emotional effect on the story itself. Now, some of the quotes that I wanted to actually go through in chapter 3, right? The first quote, a lot of these quotes have to do with Rami and how Rami feels about Donna Rae. First quote, Donna Rae was all smiles. A funny thing about that girl that I must comment on. She could smile in such a way, not opening her lips at all, but rather gathering them together sideways so that her face looked something more curious than that of, say, the Sphinx. In the semi-dark, her eyes were limpid. In her hands, Mrs. Hilcher was carrying something wrapped in a white tablecloth and smelling much like, nay, even better than corn pone, but it was corn pone. I sucked in the fragrance all the while watching the face of Donna Rae's. Now, he's very into Donna Rae, we can say, but I think he's just pleased with how beautiful he thinks she is. Again, the writer is using a lot of different types of imagery that helps to keep us interested and helps to keep us invested in the story, if I may. And when we listen to how he describes her as well, he's not just saying, oh, she's pretty, she has nice hair. He's talking about how her facial expressions have an effect on him emotionally. Listen to this quote now. In the lamplight, Donna Rae was pretty. Her face was a younger Mrs. Hilcher's, and her teeth gave her mouth something explicit. I mean, they made you think whatever she was going to say would be said in the best of ways, those kind of teeth. Now, he's breaking on all of the little details about her that really has his interest, but he's obviously smitten by her. He's obviously fully invested in how pretty she is. But I think the most important thing that we have to gather from that is that because of how into her he is, she has his attention, she has his focus, and he's willing to bond with her, to build this friendship. So what we'll find is happening now is the start of something that will be important in the future. My next quote, I have two more quotes from chapter 3. And remember, chapter 3 is called Neighbors. So the focus of chapter 3 was definitely to get us to see them getting closer. But they had to do this by showing just how much Rami was into both of them. Just how excited Rami was to have friends around. Because remember, he's getting all of this pushback from his peers at school. His whole life has been turned upside down, and these two ladies are giving him a little bit of balance. He's giving him a little bit of balance. We went to bed, and I couldn't help thinking of Father and Mrs. Hilcher, Jake and Ma. What was happening? I couldn't get much of it all. I didn't mind Mrs. Hilcher having come to see Father. So why did I hate Jake's being at Ma's house? I guess it was different. I guess for men everything was different. Because he had dispossessed Father. Legally or not, he had used craft and a whole lot of ruthlessness and cruelty. He should be acting to the very end in a callous way to anybody called Johnson or ex-Johnson. I didn't like that. And Ma, too, couldn't she understand that? I guess that was why Father's face was set. Now, what we find that is happening now is that Rami's family life has been turned upside down. So he's thinking about Mrs. Hilcher and his father, but he's comfortable. And then he's thinking of Jake and Ma, and he's uncomfortable. And that kind of comes down to the theme of women in society, and we'll kind of dip into that theme a little bit soon, where Ma is almost seen as a possession. And Son has lost all his possessions to Jake, and Ma kind of feels like the last straw. Now, it's not really a right thing to be treating women like possession, but at the end of the day, what is happening is that this is a symbol, or this is an indication that Son is losing everything. And that is why it's an interesting turning point to go into chapter 4, because chapter 4 is called growing. You understand? And if you lose everything, the only thing you have to do is to plant new seeds to grow all over again. And here's the last quote. In the night I woke up and heard Father turning in his bed, which is a sign that his father, Son, is probably going through the same mental issues. Turning in his bed. Then he got up and I began to smell tobacco, and I knew that he was smoking. Smoking is a sign that he's stressed, because smoking is known to release stress, or be a sign that he wants to relax. So the fact that he's smoking means that all of this is definitely on his head and stressing him out. I thought of Donna Rae once more, and I was almost ready to fall asleep again, just like that. I wish Father would do the same, find something or someone to think about to make him sleepy. Maybe Mom, maybe Mrs. Hilcher, why not? And then I had the strangest idea about Ma and Father. A wicked thought. I was ashamed to think of it a second time, but it was this, that maybe they hadn't been compatible at all. So what is happening is that his world is crashing down on him, and he has to now accept the fact that whether it's his parents or not, two people who aren't compatible can't really be together. And all of that is interesting because the author is letting us see, or will let us see, the compatibility with him and Donna Rae. So while he's seeing all of the things he likes about Donna Rae, he's realizing that maybe Ma and Son, his mother and his father, just weren't a good match. And now, at his young age, he has to try and accept that. So that also taps into the theme of family relationships. These events by these characters and where they are, which is a setting, is now affecting the family relationship that Rami lives in. So he has to now change his whole life for that. Moving on to chapter 4 quotes. The first quote. Sometimes Donna Rae and I would walk to the village on Friday afternoons to buy fresh meat at the butcher's stall, for it was a poor family indeed. Or one with odd taste that did not want a bit of fresh beef on Fridays. Now, what I like about this quote is that we're seeing Rami act like he's husband and wife with Donna Rae. He's trying to push this family feeling with Donna Rae that he isn't getting from his father and his mother. So what is happening now is that he's finding that comfort in doing certain errands with Donna Rae. Here's another one that's interesting. Well, this more talks about the growth of the farm. so I won't read that quote. Right? But there was one more. Okay. Right. So they're talking about going into the town, just like we said in the summary. And father didn't really like that. But here it comes. So I drive the cart. If Betty here is willing to risk her neck, sure, you drive it. Risk, son. This boy is your body and soul. Why shouldn't I trust him? Meaning that she trusted father and me, mostly me. So it's settled, I said. Settled, Mrs. Hilcher said. Mrs. Hilcher, I said, I like you. What are you going to sell in the market, Donna Rae? Who said I was going? She asked rather unhappily. Not going, I said. Now, what we'll find is that Son, Rami, Mrs. Hilcher, and Donna Rae are making plans together. So there's a possibility that there's a new family structure. So the interest that Rami has in Donna Rae may not even be husband and wife, or that he's interested in her as he likes her, but he wants that family feeling. And he gets that closeness from Donna Rae and Mrs. Hilcher. Mrs. Hilcher trusts him. And even in that quote where she says, this boy is your body and soul, why shouldn't I trust him? So Mrs. Hilcher is saying, if I trust you, son, here is a chip off the old block. I definitely trust him. And this gives Rami some sort of comfort. It gives him a little bit of happiness. Now, these quotes show us how chapter 3 and 4 become a turning point for the lives, because they're now building a life together where they have happy times together, they're doing business together, and they're spending time. And this is a real turning point for Rami, because Son is becoming a new man. Rami is getting used to a new family structure, and now the plot gets to move forward to see how they can now get past all of the tribulation, because we haven't forgotten that Son lost everything, and people are still going to try and take advantage of him. But what we like is the fact that these characters, Betty and Donna Rae, are affecting Son and Rami in a positive light, allowing him to become a better man. Alright? Well, that is it for today's class. And we looked at characters in chapters 3 and 4. The next class that we're going to do will be chapters 3 and 4, but we're going to look at themes, right? And we'll touch on a few of them today: women in society, family relationships. So we'll go more in depth into that, and then we can move to the next 2 chapters. Alright? Big up yourself, class. And please read the book.